A contractor with no social media, no business website, and no interest in television applied for a reality show on a whim and built the most loyal fan base in renovation television. That contractor is Chase Morrill, and the show is Maine Cabin Masters. By the time you finish this, you'll know exactly why it almost ended twice, why the crew bought the house from their very first episode, and what the show's uncertain future actually means for the people who built it. Chase Morrill was not the kind of person who should have become a television star. He was born on Christmas Day, 1977, in Augusta, Maine, a 10th-generation Mainer with roots so deep in the region that the landscape was practically in his DNA. His father served in the U.S. Army overseas, meeting Chase's mother in Germany before bringing her back to the Augusta-Gardner area, where Chase grew up surrounded by people who built things with their hands. His grandmother handled plumbing, his grandfather handled electrical. The idea that you fix what's broken rather than replace it was never a philosophy in that household. It was just Tuesday. He went to the College of the Atlantic in Bar Harbor and earned a degree in community planning. His future crew members, Ryan Eldridge, who studied English, and Matt Dix, who chased a degree tied to the ski industry, were circling back to the same thing after college: building. Not television, not fame, just building. When Chase came back to Central Maine, he started a contracting business called Kennebec Property Services. No website, no Instagram, no Facebook. Clients found him through his wife, or through his team, or through word of mouth passed across the kind of tight-knit communities where people have been recommending the same carpenter for 3 generations. He wore Carhartt. He had a strawberry blonde beard. He crouched in crawl spaces installing water heaters and called it a good afternoon. Then a friend made a phone call. A production company was looking for a Maine crew that specialized in rescuing old camps, the cabins and retreats that generations of Maine families had passed down, let fall apart, and quietly stopped visiting. They wanted people who could salvage original materials, who understood the character of these buildings, who wouldn't tear something down just because it was easier than saving it. The friend thought of Chase. Chase, not for career reasons, not for marketing potential, applied out of nothing more than curiosity. And that decision, made without strategy, without calculation, without any plan, is where this whole story begins. The production company found what it was looking for in Vassalboro, Maine, where Chase and the crew filmed a pilot at a pondside camp, where the concept was simple: take a rundown camp or cabin, find the family history buried inside it, restore the structure without erasing that history. Bring in Ashley Morrill, Chase's sister, a designer who had studied media and graphic design at the University of Southern Maine and spent time in Colorado before coming home, to make the interiors feel like the place still belonged to the people who loved it. Add Ryan Eldridge, Ashley's husband, who served as the calm voice in a crew that did not always have one. Throw in Jared Jedi Baker and Matt Dixie Dix, childhood friends from the Augusta-Gardner area who had grown up alongside Chase and Ryan and knew how the other moved on a job site. The pilot worked. DIY Network picked it up for a full season. Maine Cabin Masters debuted on January 20, 2017. It became DIY Network's highest-rated program across its first 3 seasons. Not one of the top performers, the top performer. By season 3, 3.5 million viewers were watching every week, a number that stunned everyone involved, including the people making it. Why did it land so hard? Partly the landscape. Maine in its wilderness form. The pine trees, the lake camps, the gray morning light on still water. Photographs beautifully, and the show leaned into it. But more than the scenery, the audience responded to the fact that nobody on screen was performing. Chase was the same person in an interview that he was in a crawl space. Ashley's genuine frustration when the aesthetic wasn't working was the same as her genuine joy when it came together. The crew argued like brothers because they were effectively brothers. There was also something else. Something in the premise that touched a nerve most renovation shows never get near. These weren't flips. This wasn't about profit margins or resale value. The cabins were falling apart because families had drifted away, because time had done what time does. And Chase's crew came in not to erase that history, but to save it. Every reveal was personal. Every finished cabin was a family getting something back they thought they'd lost. That emotional core, the idea that things worth keeping deserve someone willing to fight for them, is what built the audience, and it's what would be tested, repeatedly, in the years that followed. But here's the part that changes everything about what you just heard. The show that had survived and thrived on DIY Network for 5 seasons faced its first existential threat, not from ratings, not from internal drama, but from a corporate decision made thousands of miles away in a boardroom that had nothing to do with Maine. Chip and Joanna Gaines, the fixer-upper stars turned media entrepreneurs, had been building their own network in partnership with Discovery. The plan was simple in its scale. Take DIY Network, one of the most recognizable renovation channels on cable, and rebrand it entirely as Magnolia Network. The new channel would launch on January 5, 2022. For most shows on DIY, that announcement was effectively a cancellation notice. The Magnolia brand had a specific aesthetic, warm, aspirational, Texas farmhouse sensibility, and it was not obvious that a group of bearded Mainers rescuing rotting deer camps fit that image. Deadline did not initially list Maine Cabin Masters in the Magnolia Network lineup when the transition was announced. Fans noticed. The speculation was immediate. The online fan communities that had built around the show went into a kind of quiet panic. But Chip and Joanna Gaines made a decision that surprised people. They kept it. Maine Cabin Masters was one of a small number of DIY Network shows handpicked to survive the rebrand. Whether it was the ratings track record, the audience loyalty, or simply the recognition that the show had something genuine that could not be manufactured, the crew got the call. They were crossing over to Magnolia. The parallel to the show's own ethos was not lost on anyone paying attention. Here was a program built on the idea that things worth saving deserved to be saved, and it had just been saved. What happened to the crew after that crossing is the reason this story spread across the fan community. The Magnolia Network transition didn't just preserve Maine Cabin Masters. It accelerated everything around it. The town of Manchester, Maine, about an hour north of Portland, population roughly 2,000, was already feeling the show's effect. Restaurants were opening, tourism was growing. People were driving hours to stand in the town where the crew lived and worked, in the same way that Waco, Texas had been transformed by Chip and Joanna Gaines's Magnolia Market. Ryan Eldridge noted in interviews that Manchester was genuinely changing. New businesses, new foot traffic, a town discovering that a television show about the people already living there could become an economic engine. At the center of it was the Kennebec Cabin Company. In 2019, Chase was driving past a property on Western Avenue in Manchester when he spotted a for sale sign. He called his friend Tom Daggett. Fans of the show who remember their first episode will recognize that name. The Daggetts were the family whose camp the crew renovated in Season 1, Episode 1. The very first cabin, the first reveal. Chase bought the family's homestead, a property originally built in the 1850s on the site of an old tavern. The hitching post from the original building was still out front. The crew renovated it. Raised ceilings, shiplap walls, open concept, exactly the treatment they gave to other people's properties, and turned it into their headquarters. The Kennebec Cabin Company opened as a retail shop in February 2020, selling Maine-made crafts, tools, local artisan work, and Maine Cabin Masters merchandise. Out back, they built the Woodshed, a restaurant, bar, and event venue that now runs live music multiple nights a week during summer months. It operates 7 days a week, year-round. That's not a merchandise table bolted onto a TV show. That's a local economy. Ashley, for her part, had been building something on the side. For years on the show, she had been designing custom interiors for the cabins. Pillows, prints, objects that carried the feel of the Maine wilderness into a renovated space. In May 2023, she launched Rustic County, a women-owned home decor brand built around her original artwork. Throw pillow covers, tea towels, ornaments, serving trays, all designed by Ashley, all Maine-themed, all aimed at the fan who watched the reveal and wanted to bring a piece of it home. The response, in her words, was overwhelming. And if you think that was surprising, stay with me because this next part is why the whole story matters. In 2023, Chase Morrill bought a property in a remote village in the Molise region of Italy. He paid approximately $97,000 for what was essentially a ruin, a former animal stable in a rural Italian village, facing the same problem as a lot of rural Maine: declining population, crumbling heritage buildings, and nobody left to save them. Many villages in southern and central Italy had begun selling vacant properties to foreign buyers for minimal prices in hopes of drawing investment and reversing population collapse. Chase saw something familiar in that problem. He brought his wife Sarah and their 4 teenage children. He brought the crew. The whole thing became a 6-episode spin-off series called Maine Cabin Masters, Building Italy, which premiered on Magnolia Network on June 17, 2024. The production challenges were different in ways the crew had never encountered: finding tools without speaking Italian, navigating Italian seismic regulations which required local contractors to take the structural lead on the project, converting former animal quarters into living spaces while the entire village watched. The aesthetic that Ashley had spent a decade refining in eastern white pine and salvaged Maine timber had to find its footing in stone walls and plaster. Audience reaction was split. Some viewers appreciated the change of scenery, the inclusion of Chase's children in the work, the humanity of watching a tight-knit crew adapt to a completely unfamiliar context. Others were direct. They watched the show for Maine. The landscape, the cold mornings, the particular character of a Maine camp, that was the point. Sending the crew to Tuscany-adjacent Italy felt, to part of the fan base, like something had been diluted. Chase has been consistent in interviews about where the crew's heart is. The 27 area code, Maine. The Italy house became a private family vacation home when the cameras stopped rolling. No further international seasons have been announced. But the question the spin-off raised, whether the show's identity was portable, whether it could survive without the landscape that defined it, would look different a year later, when the real uncertainty arrived. Here's what the comments kept asking, and here's the answer they never got, until now. On February 1st, 2025, Jenna Dix passed away unexpectedly at Maine Medical Center in Portland. She was 48. Jenna was the wife of Matt "Dixie" Dix, one of the show's core crew members, a master carpenter, a childhood friend of Chase and Ryan, who had been in the fabric of this group since before the cameras ever arrived. Jenna and Dixie had met in 2000 and married the following year. She was a registered nurse who had gone on to earn a master's degree and become a nurse practitioner. Her obituary described her as someone who was happiest at camp, up to camp, in the Maine phrase, surrounded by family, listening to music, drinking Prosecco on Saturday mornings, snowmobiling through the woods in winter. The Magnolia Network confirmed her passing through the Maine Cabin Masters Instagram account 4 days later. The statement was brief and specific. She was the beloved wife of Dixie, the goddaughter of Ryan Eldridge's parents, and a genuine part of the extended family that the show had always been, on screen and off. No cause of death was disclosed. Ryan Eldridge posted a tribute of his own. He and Jenna had been born on the same day, 2 years apart. Their parents had been best friends. He had been there, he wrote, the night Jenna and Dixie first locked eyes. This crew has never been a cast. They were a community long before a production company called. The people who show up on screen every season have been showing up for each other. At weddings, at camp, at the kind of ordinary Tuesday moments that don't get filmed, for their entire adult lives. Jenna Dix was part of that. Her loss hit the crew as exactly what it was, a loss. Not a storyline, not a moment in an episode arc. The show kept filming, the crew held. Most people who know this story stop here, but the real story starts right now. Season 12 of Maine Cabin Masters premiered December 29, 2025, and ran through March 9, 2026. The season covered 10 episodes, a storm-damaged cabin rebuild in Monmouth, a ski shack renovation for a local high school, a generational camp restoration for a 92-year-old homeowner on a private island in the remote North Maine woods. The kind of projects the show has always done well. Property with a story behind it, an owner with a reason to save it, and a crew capable of doing the thing that needs to be done. When the season ended, Magnolia Network had not announced a Season 13 renewal. Industry trackers listed the show's status as fate to be determined, not canceled, not renewed. In the gap between those two things, where most shows that have been on for 12 seasons eventually disappear. This is the moment the audience had not seen before. Not the Italy pivot, not the network transition, not even Lance Gatcomb's quiet departure from the crew after Season 5 in 2020 without a single official explanation, a departure that the production team never publicly addressed. This was different. 12 seasons, nearly a decade, a crew whose real-world community had outlasted 2 network identities, a global pandemic, a spin-off that divided the fan base, and the kind of personal grief that doesn't get written into a script. What came next was the answer that mattered. Magnolia Network confirmed Season 13. It premieres May 25, 2026, with an episode called Restoring an Island Legacy. Chase and the crew taking on a lakeside cabin with off-grid constraints and island logistics, helping a homeowner honor her late husband while bringing the property back to life. Chase Morrill, Ashley, Ryan, Jedi, and Dixie, the same core 5 who have been doing this since a production company cold-called a contractor who had no website, are back. And if you think that was surprising, stay with me because this next part is why the whole story matters. There is a version of this story where Maine Cabin Masters is a renovation show that survived a network transition, launched a spin-off, and got renewed for a 13th season. That version is accurate. It is also missing everything. What Chase Morrill built, and the word is accurate here, is not a television property. It is a community that happens to have a television show attached to it. The crew grew up together. The businesses they built afterward, the Maine Cabin Company, the Woodshed, Ashley's Rustic County Line, the From the Woodshed podcast, are all extensions of the same original thing, a group of people from central Maine who found meaning in saving the places other people had given up on. The Manchester that Ryan Eldridge described in 2022, restaurants opening, tourism growing, a small town discovering what it was capable of, is not a side effect of the show. It is proof that the show was never really about the cabins. Think about the premise for a moment. Every renovation show works the same way. Property comes in broken, leaves transformed. Most of them are about the transformation. Maine Cabin Masters has always been about why the property was broken in the first place, who stopped coming, what life got in the way, what it means for a family to find something they'd quietly stopped believing they could still have. That is a different program entirely. And it turns out that audience, the one that understands loss and preservation and the specific grief of watching something fall apart when you're not looking, is more loyal, more durable, and more committed than any ratings number can fully describe. The crew has survived a DIY network cancellation that wasn't a cancellation, a global shutdown, a beloved cast member's departure that was never explained, a spin-off that fractured the fan base, a personal loss that touched every person involved, and a season finale that aired with no renewal confirmation on the other side. Season 13 is confirmed, but whatever comes after Season 13, another season, a final episode, something no one has announced yet, none of it erases what was already built. Chase Morrill walked into a production company meeting with no website and no social media and no plan. He got curious about a television show, and it became the most significant thing he has ever built. Not the cabins, the community. The story of Maine Cabin Masters is not the story of a renovation show that made it big. It is the story of a group of people who kept showing up, for the work, for each other, and for the families who needed someone to believe their memories were worth saving. Season 13 premieres May 25, 2026, and the full crew is intact. The Maine Cabin Company is open 7 days a week. Ashley's Rustic County Line is growing. The Woodshed is still pouring Maine microbrews. Whatever Magnolia Network decides next, Chase Morrill has built something in Manchester that outlasts a television schedule. Here is the question this story leaves open. Maine Cabin Masters almost disappeared when DIY Network became Magnolia. If Chip and Joanna Gaines hadn't made the call to keep it, this show would have ended in 2022 after 5 seasons. Do you think the show would have survived long-term on its own? Or was that one network decision the only thing standing between them and cancellation? Drop your answer below.